Hello, BookTube. I've mentioned a couple of times on this channel the BookTube event Classics and Company. This was originally started by Ann Novella and Micah Cummins as a kind of rambling, informal way for a group of people to read certain classics together, idiosyncratically picked classics together. Not on a monthly schedule or a weekly schedule, but really every 90 days or so. And they did me the great honor of asking me to join Classics and Company, not only for the rest of this year, but for next year. Tons and tons of fun. But in any case, I would have been part of Classics and Company now because going on till the end of September, the classic in question is The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, which is a 1,000-page long, 1,000-year-old novel about courtly life in ancient Japan and also about the main character, Genji, the Shining Prince, who is the son of the emperor but is not in the line of succession. He is not. So we are not reading about affairs of state. We're reading about just affairs because Genji from an early age, from when he's a teenager, is beautiful and amorous. A womanizer is what we would call him today, but the times are different then. Genji can be, the book can be a little bit of a tricky experience to read in the age of #MeToo. In the age where we very rightly are far more aware of issues of consent than we ever have been in American history or in world history, those become minefields of issues in the course of The Tale of Genji. It is still, it is still a big, sprawling, involving, wonderful, and absolutely beautiful book. This is a beautiful book. It is shot through with poetic imagery to the extent that it is just hard. It's hard to imagine in our own cultural milieu. It's hard to imagine what's going on here. These characters are suffused with poetry. It's not just that the narrator is suffusing the narrative with poetry, it's that the characters think and breathe poetry. So there's lots of beauty here. There's lots of things that will give a modern reader pause, especially in terms of Genji's relationship with women. This is, in other words, what I'm trying to say, an intensely cancelable book. Fortunately, for Classics and Company, fortunately on BookTube, I'm not dealing with that. So I don't have to give it much attention except to warn you, the three-dimensional, fully grown adult who's perfectly happy not to agree completely with everything you read. The only reason that I would note it is to let you know that you will encounter that if you encounter this book. But the main thing I want to talk about in this video is a problem that comes up in all sorts of things, not just The Tale of Genji. It's highlighted in The Tale of Genji, which is how at the mercy of things you are for the translator. We've talked many times on this channel about the vagaries of translation, the way that you do things, how you handle translation. I myself absolutely love The Tale of Genji, and I'm not able to read it in the original. I would imagine that most of the people for Classics and Company who are involved in Classics and Company, who are taking Genji on for this 90 days, aren't able to read it in the original. Most native speakers of Japanese cannot read it comfortably in the original. So here, translator comes front and center. When it comes to The Tale of Genji, translating an unabridged version of The Tale of Genji is no small undertaking. It's an enormous book. And it's also incredibly narratively complex. You have to be good at not only prose, but historical fiction and also poetry and lyric. So there haven't been many translations, and there have been 4 big ones into the English language. There was one by Arthur Waley, then there was one by Edward Seidensticker, then there was Royal Tyler, which is probably the best known to all of you because it's in the Penguin Classic line. The Royal Tyler translation of The Tale of Genji is a beautiful Penguin Classic Deluxe edition. It really is something to have on your shelf. It really is a print and paper book to have on your shelf. I don't say that about many such books. And then, comparatively more recently, there's Dennis Washburn, who did a big 1-volume Genji. And all of these things have their strengths and weaknesses. The Arthur Waley, for instance, has the strength that is common to early translations of Tolstoy, in that it is very much giving you an English language novel that is The Tale of Genji, rather than trying to convey or preserve any of the weirdness that is found in the original. That is no longer in vogue for translation. Translators don't typically do that anymore with ancient works. They want to preserve the strangeness, or even not so ancient works, Victorian works. They want to preserve a lot more of the flavor of the original, so you tend not to get translators who will do that anymore, which is why in the exercise that I want to do today, I'm leaving Arthur Waley out. Tuttle does a very beautiful paperback, a squat little square paperback of his translation that is well worth your time if you want to. But I think even if you want to, even if you're fairly open-minded, even if you're indulgent towards the idiosyncrasies of translators, you're still going to read the Arthur Waley and think, I think this is a lot more of you than it is of Murasaki Shikibu. And you're probably not going to like that. Even though the Arthur Waley Genji translation, the reading experience of reading that fat little paperback is very enjoyable. You're still going to come away thinking, I don't know how much of this is the original. I think this might be a little less of the original than I want. You have to be careful what you wish for when it comes to Genji in terms of that feeling, because from what I can gather, from what I have read extensively on the subject, from what I can gather, the original of Genji is bewildering. You probably want people to start filling things in interpolation-wise in the individual lines. If I have cautioned people about reading Homer, because Homer will often not name a character, but instead say who they're the son of, often in Homer you will hear of the exploits or the intervention of the son of Demeter, or the son of Leto, or whatnot, or the son of Latona, and you don't know who that is. When you're reading, if you don't know Greek mythology at your fingertips, you're not going to know who that is. Oftentimes, translators of the Iliad into English will simply change that. They'll encounter that son of Alcmea or whatever and simply change it. They'll take that out and they'll put in Hercules. They'll just change it that way, so as not to confuse you. Why do that? Why include it in its original obscurity if that's all it's going to do is send you hurrying for a footnote? Well, that doesn't happen often in Homer, and it doesn't ever happen in crucial details, but when it comes to Genji, a huge number of the characters in the Tale of Genji are referred to almost always by their job, by the prefecture they call home, by their temporary employment, by their relationship to Genji. Oh my god. When you are a translator of Genji into English, you are immediately faced with... I'm sorry, I keep calling the book Genji, but also the character. I should stop doing that because that's got to be confusing. When you're translating the book of the Tale of Genji into English, if you're an English language translator, you're going to look at stuff like that and think, well, I absolutely have to change that, or my readers aren't going to have any idea who's saying what to who at any point. Do you want that, or don't you, as a reader? Keep in mind, when you're reading a work of great literature in translation, your job, your priority is not how critically acclaimed is this translation. That should not be on your mind at all. The only thing that should be on your mind is, am I getting along with this translator? I can't read the original. I need this translator in the room for every page of this book. And I want to get along with the book. I want to add the book, some form of it, somehow, to my reading world. I need the translator for that. So I have to get along with the translator. Simple as that. I don't need to know the credentials that the professors at the Columbia University are saying about the translator. I myself need to get along with them on the page. And when it comes to Homer, if that's Richmond Latimer, fine. If that's Robert Fitzgerald, fine. If it's Butcher and Lang, a translation that's routinely vilified, if you get along with it, fine. You can parse out the details of what kind of a job your translator did down the line. Once you love the work, once you love the essences, the raw bones of the work, then you can worry about the fineries of the translator. Same thing is true with Genji. There are 4 major English language translations that are available. Which one is going to sit best with you? Which one is going to make the right decisions for you? So I want to go through 3 translations of Genji. I'm going to leave out Arthur Waley. You can try him if you want. Arthur Waley is essentially what Rosemary Evans is doing to Tolstoy. He's essentially making it a novel, an English novel. If you want that, absolutely do it. There is a paperback. It's quite lovely, and it will introduce you to the world of Genji and make that world a lot more accessible than even the 3 translations that I'm dealing with now. But for today, we're going to deal with the Seidensticker, the Royale, and the Washburn. We're going to pick one part of one chapter. Each chapter of Genji is celebrated as a world on its own. Each chapter of Genji has been commemorated in lacquer work, screen work, artistry. There have been tons of commemorative poems to each chapter. Each chapter is a cut glass little work of art on its own. But we're going to deal with one part of one chapter. We're going to read it in all three translations and just see what we make, or what you make, of whether or not one of these might be more your cup of tea. These three are available to you. So we will start with Edward Seidensticker. We'll start with his translation. And we are going to move to chapter 28 of The Tale of Genji. This is the exact midway point in the novel. And it is designed you are very much supposed to know that. And at this point in the novel, Genji himself is in his late 30s. And his son is 15 years old. Genji is still beautiful. He is still endlessly handsome. You look at him, you don't believe he's in his 30s. Even his son doesn't believe he's in his 30s. But his son is also very good looking. And this is the moment when the son enters manhood. This is the halfway point in the book. And there will be echoes, lots of echoes of earlier chapters in the book when Genji was a young man. When we meet Genji in the book of Genji, he is a young man. He is his son's age. The son is, in the original, often referred to only by his occupation and not by his name. Same thing with a lot of the characters in this chapter. But this chapter deals with the summer house of the Empress. All of the high-powered ladies are there. Genji is there. The summer house is a marvel of Japanese landscaping. But in this chapter, in Edward Seidensticker, he refers to this chapter as the typhoon. That is the name in English of the storm. There's a storm that comes up, a storm of wind, that strikes the household, strikes the summer house. Doesn't destroy it, but Japanese architecture at the time was very much portable, repositionable, very delicate, designed so that if an earthquake happened or a great typhoon came through, the damage would be easily fixable. It wouldn't be huge masonry walls falling or anything like that. So, screenery is blown away by this storm, and that is very important. These ladies are not supposed to be seen by passersby. They're not supposed to be seen by anybody casually. That was just the mores of the time. And Genji's son, his name is Yugiri, but he's in other translations you're going to see he's not often referred to that way. But his 15-year-old son has come to the palace at the teeth of the storm, and at the moment that he's there, he catches an unguarded glimpse of Lady Murasaki. I don't know how far we could go to say that anybody is the love of Genji's life, but if anybody is, it's her. And she also is unbelievably beautiful. And not only is this the first time that Yugiri sees her, but it's the first time he's really seeing any women that aren't, related, that aren't in his own household. It's a wonderful moment. We have here a woodcut. Seidensticker includes woodcuts. There we see the plants bending in the wind there. And you can't really make it out, but the voluminous cloak of the character on the bottom there is blowing in the wind. Through screenwork, through latticed screenwork, no protection against a strong wind. This probably wasn't an actual hurricane, but a really strong remnant of one, maybe. So we're going to settle down in this scene and read you just a bit, and then we'll move on to two other versions of the same bit to see which one you like better. So here we are. Let's start here. Okay. This is almost impossible to do out loud because Murasaki Shikibu is loading every line with incredible poetic resonance. There's no way to do that as a performance, but we'll give it a try. We'll try a little anyway. Murasaki's southeast garden had been pruned and otherwise readied for winter, but the wind was more than the little Hagi had been waiting for. This is a flower. Seidensticker notes it. So you've got footnotes in this version. He notes what it is and personifies the little plants to say they were ready for winter winds. They were ready to sort of have their blossoms blown off, but this is much worse than that. Its branches turned and twisted and offered no place for the raindrops. Murasaki came out of the veranda. Genji was with his daughter. He's in another room behind a closed door. Murasaki came out to the veranda. Genji was with his daughter. Approaching along the east gallery, Yugiri saw over a low screen that a door was open at a corner of the main hall. He stopped to look at the women inside. That is a motif that occurs throughout this book, whether it's Genji doing the stopping to look or whether it's Yugiri or any other character. It was a big motif in the Japanese literature of the time. a man stopping to gaze at women who do not know he's looking at them. It's a very erotic thing, also very much a sign of coming of age. The screens having been folded and put away, the view was unobstructed. The lady at the veranda, it would be Murasaki. Her noble beauty made him think of a fine birch cherry blooming through the hazes of spring. There's a little footnote here. Side and Sticker barely goes into it. What does he say? He refers to the actual word for cherry here, which is kabazukura. And he says the word, which seems to refer to a wild cherry, is not found in the modern language. So kabazukura is the word for a what is it called again? A birch cherry blooming. And that's all that Side and Sticker tells you here in this moment. He does not refer to the fact that when Genji, a younger Genji, sees Murasaki for the first time in this book, he thinks in exactly the same terms about a mountain, not a birch cherry, but a mountain tree, a mountain cherry tree. And he imagines himself as the mist clinging to those cherries. Incredibly delicate, incredibly erotic. There's none of it here, but Side and Sticker doesn't draw your attention to a point that he could have drawn your attention to, which is that Yugiri's very first impression of Murasaki is the same as his father's. They both, the same thing comes to both their minds. But anyway, let's try to move on here. It was a gentle flow which seemed to come to him and sweep over him. She laughed as her women fought with the unruly blinds, you could just picture. Though he was too far away to make out what she said to them, and the bloom was more radiant. She stood surveying the scene, seeing what the winds had done to each of the flowers. Her women were all very pretty too, but he did not really look at them. It almost frightened him to think why Genji had kept him so at a distance. Such beauty was irresistible, and just such inadvertencies as this were to be avoided at all costs. You are not supposed to accidentally see these women. And Yugiri knows this. He knows why Genji has very zealously guarded anyone seeing Lady Murasaki. As he started to leave, Genji came through one of the doors to the west, separating Murasaki's room from his daughter's. An irritable, impatient sort of wind, he said. You must close your shutters. There are men about and you are visible. Okay, we won't go on, because I'm already belaboring this. We won't go on. That is the moment that Yugiri sees. He sees something he's not supposed to see. He sees Lady Murasaki and her ladies. He gazes full upon her before she knows he's looking at her. And he's totally enraptured with her beauty. Now, let's think about this translation a bit that we've seen. It's very workmanlike. It's very straightforward. You're having this scene described. Did you like it? Did you like this version of it? I, myself, am a little impatient with it because there's a whole lot going on here that you could have delicately noted in a footnote. Elements that I'm sure there are lots of elements to the Tale of Genji that are lost in translation. I'm sure that I have never read anything like the original. But there are parallels here. Yugiri, the son of Genji, at age 15, sees Lady Murasaki and is not only totally taken with her beauty, dumbfounded, as we're going to see in later translations that are going to bring that out more. He's dumbfounded by her beauty. He's never seen anything like it. Not only is that reaction the same as the young Genji had, but the very image that comes to his mind is the same as what Genji had. So, and Side and Sticker doesn't note that. You'll read this scene, and unless you remember it, it won't be brought to mind. So let's move on to Royal Tyler, to his Tale of Genji, and we'll go to chapter 28 in. He's only got bookmarks all throughout here. Let's find the right one. Okay, so we'll go to the first chapter, chapter 28 in Royal Tyler. In Royal Tyler's book, you get the name of the chapter in English, the typhoon, but you also get the Japanese title, Nawaki, which is the name for this kind of storm, a very specific kind of name. And you also get a description of what that title means. And you get more than that, which we don't get in Side and Sticker. You might not want this, but you should know that this is a difference in these translations. In the Royal Tyler, you get a description of when this chapter takes place and who is in it and who they are. Because here, the captain is Yugiri. He is simply called the captain. But that is this character. The same thing also with the Lady of the Southeast Quarter. The Lady of the Southeast Quarter is Lady Murasaki. And here you get a breakdown of what that is, how old these characters are, because you're following throughout the whole book. Are you going to find notes like that distracting? Are they going to break the spell? Or are you going to find them valuable? They're here in the Royal Tyler translation. So now that we know that, let's go to the same passage. You have a woodcut, but it's a different woodcut than we got in the side and sticker. That is a pattern that tends to hold true in Genji translations into English. You get little Japanese woodcuts of them, because this book has inspired so much artwork over the centuries. Let's find out the exact spot that we were in. Okay, in the southeast quarter, it had begun to blow just when work was being done on the garden, and this wind cruelly surprised the languishing hagi fronds. So once again, we are personifying these plants, and they are surprised. From near the veranda, she watched the wind again and again sweep away every last drop of dew. So, okay, so let me go back to this one. Sorry, I'm being an uber geek here. But let me go back to here. We were told in this one that the wind twisted and turned the branches and offered no place for raindrops. No mention of dew. In this, we're told that it twists and turns the branches and sweeps away the dew. All the dew that's left. I think that's interesting. That's a difference. Let's see here. Yes. From near the veranda, she watched the wind again and again sweep away every last drop of dew. Genji was with their daughter when his son, the captain, came round. So in this translation, at this point, you are informed that the young woman that Genji is with is also Murasaki's daughter. And you are simply referred to the captain. Yugiri is not named. The captain glanced absently over the standing panel on the eastern bridgeway and in through the open double doors, and he stood still to watch in silence when he noticed a crowd of gentlewomen. The screens had been folded up and moved aside because of the wind, and he could see straight through to a lady seated in the aisle room. There was no mistaking her nobly warm and generous beauty. She looked like a lovely mountain cherry tree in perfect bloom, emerging from the mists of a spring dawn. He gets that close. He gets much closer in the side and sticker version. He is picturing a mountain cherry tree in the mists of dawn. It's not an erotic image, not explicitly, the way it is when Genji originally pictures it, where he is the mist clinging to the cherries. Where it's superbly, delicately erotic. Here it's not, but there is the echo. But anyway, let's move on here. The breath of her enchantment seemed irresistibly to perfume his face even as he watched. She was nothing less than extraordinary. For some reason, she smiled to devastating effect when the wind blew the blinds in and her women held them down. She was too worried about her flowers to leave them and come in. He could not take his eyes off her, despite also the varied charms of her women, and he knew now how right his father had been in case precisely this should happen, to keep him well away from a lady who could not fail to trouble anyone who saw her. He was making off again for fear of being noticed when Genji, returning from his daughters, opened the inner sliding panel and entered the room. What a horrible, maddening wind! Get your shutters down. There must be men about and anyone could see you. Okay, so that is the Royal Tyler translation. One thing you notice right away, compared with the side and sticker, is how much more detail you get. Not only who went where and who's doing what and where they're sitting, but also internal details from the captain, from Yugiri. You get a lot more of what he's thinking. It's amplified quite a bit. So is the amplification in the original, or is it not? And Royal Tyler is sort of adding it to flesh out the feel of the moment. Unless you read Genji in the original, you won't know. But it is a very different experience, right? I think you can see those two are very different. So again, we're not talking about who's best, who's doing the most scholarly approved job. We're talking about which job did you like better. In addition to the footnotes, the added explanatory material, you have those differences. Those scenes, the side and sticker feels bare-boned compared to the Royal Tyler. Now we'll move on to the Washburn translation. This is the paperback of the Washburn translation with quotes all around, blurbs all around on the back. There's one from Edith Grossman, the great translator of Don Quixote. There's one from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and there's one from Open Letters Monthly down here at the bottom. So here we're going to go to, this is a one volume, we're going to go to chapter 28 here. Dennis Washburn does not, he puts Milwaukee front and center there. And he doesn't call it a typhoon, he calls it an autumn tempest. And he footnotes it. There are lots of footnotes in this book. So let's see Let's get to the exact place where we want to be. Okay, here we go. And I might point out that in this version, it's almost all one paragraph. It's almost not broken up at all. The storm struck at the time of year when Murasaki's garden was being groomed in preparation for the coming season, and it was far more violent than the breeze that the forlorn-looking bush clover, its twigs now shorn of leaves all the way down, had been expecting. So here, the Hagi plant is not even named. Instead, Washburn decides to translate the name so that you know what he's talking about without needing a footnote. Murasaki was watching the bush clover from her seat near the veranda as the wind twisted twigs and branches and completely scattered the dew. So here, once again, side and stickers out in the cold. Royal Tyler and Dennis Washburn are both talking about scattered dew. So probably that's in the original, and side and stickers just leaving it out and talking about raindrops instead. Genji was with the Akashi princess. That is a character. That's a new name. That's her designation. You just have to learn designations here. Was with the Akashi princess in her rooms when his son arrived at the main hall and casually glanced. Oh, do you want to get down, baby? Well, do you want to do some Frida yoga? Do you want to get down there? Come on. There you go. Oh, some things are untranslatable. Oh my goodness gracious, baby. Oh, 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 the way to your tips of your toes. Oh, goodness. There you go. There you go. Very good. All right. All right. Now let's move on here. You see the backwards and forwards here, the give and take that you get in different translations. In the Royal Tyler, Yugiri is not named. He is simply the captain. And the Akashi Princess is not even designated as the Akashi Princess. Here you get all sorts of that. You just have to maybe keep a scorecard, maybe put a note in your book, make an index card, and note the designation of a character and their name, and make that your bookmark, so that it's right there with you as you're reading. Anyway, Genji was with the Akashi princess in her rooms when his son arrived at the main hall and casually glanced over the low one-panel wooden screen in the passageway leading from the east hall to the main quarters. Looking through the open double doors, he could see a large number of women congregating inside, and he stood there silently observing them. That is the moment. That is a motif so prevalent and so important in Japanese literature that it actually has a term of its own. The wind was so fierce that the folding screens had all been put away, so there was nothing to obstruct his view of one particular woman sitting near the narrow outer room near the veranda. There could be no mistake about it. The woman he was looking at was Murasaki. Her refined grace and radiant beauty put him in mind of a cherry tree off of the mountains, its wild profusion of blossoms dimly visible through the mists of the spring dawn. So Washburn's adding a lot here. This is very fleshed out, very poetic language. Her gentle allure was like a fragrance that seemed almost cruelly to waft over his face as he stared at her in hopeless longing. She was more splendid than any woman he had ever seen before. The wind was blowing the blinds open, and her women were struggling to keep them pulled down, when, for some reason you could not fathom, she smiled, an expression that made her unbearably attractive. Concerned about her flowers, she could not stop watching the storm and would not retreat into the main room. The ladies in waiting near her were also very attractive, each in her own way, but he couldn't take his eyes off Murasaki. His father had always kept him far away from her, knowing that her beauty could not help but stir the passions of any man with eyes to see, and he realized how prudent his father was to keep her hidden. Afraid that someone might catch him standing there, he was about to withdraw when his father opened the sliding doors that led off to the Akashi princess's rooms and went out to where Murasaki was sitting. "What a nasty, restless wind," Genji said. "Put the shutters down. With the blinds fluttering about, any man who might be around could get a clear view of you." Okay, so that's the Dennis Washburn translation. I wonder how many of you will have the instinctive think of, that's the one I want. That was the full narrative detail. That was all the full narrative details that I want. It didn't feel as stilted as the side and sticker, and it didn't feel as oddly disjointed as the Royal Tyler. That was the whole thing taking me in hand. If you felt that way, well, you're not alone. This Genji version sold really well. It wasn't just the blurb that did that. This is pretty well acclaimed. But it has its strengths and weaknesses. Its critical apparatus is right there. But maybe you don't want that. Maybe that intrudes on your reading experience. Like I said, This is all about how you're getting along with the translator, with the job the translator is doing. For your reading of The Tale of Genji for Classics and Company, you're going to be dealing with one of these translations, I'm assuming. If you're reading it in English, you're going to be dealing with one of these three. I would love to know if you are. Of course, there's a Discord for Classics and Company. Feel free to go there and sound off with all the other people who are chiming in on Genji. But also in the comments of this video, I'd love to know which of those three you like the most. Which of them did what you want a translation to do? My main point being, don't look over your shoulder. To me, to any expert, to any scholar or academic, don't look at anybody. The point here is for the translator, for you to get along with the translator yourself. So when it comes to any translated work, I always say, pull down a bunch of translations and read them all together. Read one small part together and see which one gets along with you the best. That's what I tried to do in this video, because when you're dealing with Tale of Genji, before you can even come to love it, it's got to be demystified for you, at least a little. And it's the translator that's going to do that. So let me know what you made of these three different translations. I'll wrap this up now. This has gone on way too long, but I'll be back. And thank you, BookTube.